Language development is very interesting. If you remember, we discussed about phonetics and morphology earlier. So we are sort of ignoring those two ideas. We're starting with uh, some other concepts of language, and then we'll get into understanding the change in terms of how development of language takes place, right? How does a child learn how to speak? How, what age, what are the theories, etc., etc., right? Uh, so there is phonemes, then you have morphemes. After that, there is something known as the syntax, right? Syntax are the ways, laws, or rules in which words are combined to form acceptable phrases and sentences, right? So these are basic rules that exist when you're trying to speak or write in a particular language. All languages have different syntaxes. So the right statement is you went there, didn't you? Right? That's an acceptable sentence. It has good syntax. But a sentence that is not okay is didn't you? You weren't there, right? That means nothing. Like that makes no sense. So it's not an acceptable way in which a sentence can be structured. Okay. Then you have semantics, that is the meaning of words and sentences. So sentences and words must be put together in such a way that the entire sentence elicits a meaning, right? So the bicycle talked the boy into buying a candy bar, right? That's syntactically, for in terms of syntax, that's fine, right? The subject, the verb, the adverb, whatever else is where it's supposed to be, right? However, it makes no sense because the semantics are incorrect, right? Obviously, the bicycle can't talk to the boy and tell the boy to buy a candy bar, right? So that's the relationship, that you can have the right semantics, but if the syntax is incorrect, the sentence will make no sense, right? So those are two important concepts. Then you have pragmatics. This is we've discussed is the appropriate learning of when to speak, when not to speak, when to listen, when to talk, taking turns in a discussion, etc., etc., right? Now, how do these things about language develop? Initially, the nature versus nurture fight is going on about this also, right? The nature theorists will say that it's inborn, nurture theorists will say it's learned, right? So initially it was the nurture theorists who were very important. So these were the behaviorists, right? They said that language is learned as a result of learning, right? It's learned because there is reinforcement, there is imitation, and there is some conditioning that is taking place, and therefore the child keeps learning languages, right? And learning different words and so on and so forth. The criticism faced was that children are not taught all words that they know. Like you and I are not taught all words that I know, or we are not reinforced with everything. The idea is the second problem, and the major problem is that when you discuss reinforcement, you are saying that that same behavior is going to be repeated over and over and over again, right? Nothing new. But in terms of language, it's not the same word that is being praised all the time, right? So when a child says ma and you pat and you say well done, right? And when the child says pa and they say ta and ga and whatever else, you're praising the child at all points, right? Um, Therefore, they should be learning to say only ma or pa, right? They should not be mixing two things. They should not be learning new words. They should just be happy with reinforcing the same behavior, right? Because the praise is still being given for that same behavior. So again, there was a main problem with that, right? And then there's another thing that around the 18th month, right? Children suddenly start to know a lot of words. There is like a neuronal explosion that takes place in vocabulary. So again, your behaviorists cannot explain that sort of thing, right? So because of that, Chomsky was the first guy who questioned this approach to language learning, and he said that children are actually born with a device, right? A mental framework where they can acquire language. And he called it the language acquisition device, LAD, right? Which is a biological thing that all human beings have, where they can detect language categories such as phonemes, morphemes, and categorize them, right? So all children have this ability, and then depending on the kind of language they learn, these abilities will start to differ, right? Semantics and etc. etc. Uh, and the LAD also has support because there is uniformity in learning language across culture. All children learn it at similar rates, right? There are some differences, but general rule is that on average, everyone learns it at a similar rate. So again, there was support saying that, okay, maybe there is something biological about it. He went a step further and he said that there is a gene for this, but we've not found the gene, so we don't know. But there is support in terms of that everyone has this ability, it's innate. Now, the criticism was that the feral children that we spoke about a few minutes ago, right? If the ability is with everybody, then why don't feral children learn how to speak, right? Why don't they learn language when they come back to the fold of society? So it's sort of indicating that there is a certain time period or sweet spot where learning language can be done. And if it's not done, no one will learn it, right? So that is one. Yeah, and these were the two opposing factions that were fighting, right? Eventually, you had an interactionist approach, which said that both of these things are happening. Initially, they are born with the language acquisition device, right? And they are born with the ability to grasp and pay attention to language better, like phonemes and morphemes and these units. And over time, because of functions of reinforcement, punishment, praise, they learn faster and more languages, right? So there are biological influences as well as environmental influences. Okay. Now, in terms of language development, initially children go through something known as pre-linguistic communication, which is just making a lot of sound, right? The ability for their vocal cords to just make noise. So cooing, crying, gurgling, all of these are pre-linguistic communication, right? That is, they are communicating with their parents by crying, right? Saying I'm uncomfortable. So communication is still going on, but language is not learned. It's not systematic, right? So these are not meaningful, but they create a space where communication can take place. One of the kinds of pre-linguistic communication is babbling, where children make speech-like sounds, right? So e, b, ba, ma, whatever, right? Babbling starts around the third month, goes on till the first year, even after the first words have been spoken, right? Um, Babbling, interestingly, is one of those universal phenomena that all children have, right? Babbling will get slightly more complex as the child gets older and older and older. By 6 months of age, it's more in the tone of the language, okay? The first word is usually spoken around the 10th month, right? Some kids speak earlier, some speak later, but on average, between the 10th and 14th month, the first words are spoken. Now, first word, actually, not in words, first word, right? And parents get really excited about it. Typically continues till 18 months, where new words are being spoken regularly. But there is like a rapid increase by the time the child reaches 18 months. Between the 15th and the 18th month, from knowing say 50 words on average, children know 400 words on average, right? So there's a massive jump that takes place by the 18th month in terms of language development, right? uh, but all of these are just words. They are hollow phrases, meaning that they are one word utterances that are supposed to convey meaning of entire sentences and phrases, right? And again, context is important, right? Then you have the first sentence, which is children putting together more than two words to explain themselves, right? So this is a great cognitive growth and a very important domain of language development, right? This again, 18 month on average, but there is variability. Around 2 years, usually the first sentence is out. Um, the interesting thing is that they maintain the syntax of the language. So they put the subject where it's supposed to be, the verb, the adverb, etc., right? Nobody has taught them all of this till this point. They don't know what a verb is, they don't know what a subject is, but they will use the syntax absolutely perfectly, right? But some things might be excluded. So that's known as telegraphic speech, saying that mom bad ball, right? That's indicative of saying my mom, I want bad ball, right? They will not say ball bad mom. So syntax is maintained and some words are excluded, which are not necessary, basically, right? The other interesting thing that will be noticed is some children will be underextending words, so they'll use one word for only one concept, right? So if they say car, it means only their car. Other cars can't be called cars, right? If they have a blanket, that's only their blanket can be called blanket. Other things can be called other things. So it's underextended, meaning that that word is supposed to be applicable to multiple things, but for the child, it will only be applicable to one thing. On the other hand, they'll also be doing overextension, which is basically they use one word for everything. So when they see a car, all cars are cars, right? No matter if it's a truck, it's a plane, whatever, right? Anything that's moving is car. So that's an overextension. Um, Around this time, from birth only, you'll also see parents acting on adults with uh, children acting weird, right? And they'll be using all like high pitched voice and all this kind of thing, which is called motherese. It used to be called motherese, and then now they call it infant directed speech. So that's that. Then you have private speech and social speech, which we've discussed. Speech that they talk to themselves and kids talk to themselves. That's called private speech. When they're speaking to other people, it's called social speech.